The moment the old man's hands began to shake over the cafe counter, everyone pretended not to notice, but Mara Elwood felt it like a crack of thunder inside her chest. His coat was thin, his shoes soaked from melted snow, and his eyes carried the kind of exhaustion that came from being invisible for too long. The receipt printer hummed impatiently, waiting for a payment that wasn't coming, and in that pause between shame and silence, Mara made a decision that would quietly rewrite both their lives. If you believe in kindness and second chances, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel Midnight Tales. Your support keeps stories like this alive. Mara was 24, working double shifts at a small wooden cafe tucked beside a city park that glowed warmly in the daytime sun. The mornings were her favorite, when light spilled through the windows and made the steam from coffee cups look almost magical. But magic didn't pay rent. She lived in a cramped apartment with peeling paint, sent half her paycheck to her younger brother's school fees, and counted every dollar carefully before grocery shopping. Still, something about the old man standing there that morning made her forget her own worries. He hadn't asked for much, just a coffee and a sandwich, and when he realized he couldn't afford it, his shoulders folded inward like paper. Without drawing attention, Mara reached into her apron and slid her own cash into the register. It was money meant for her electricity bill, but she smiled anyway, setting the tray in front of him as if it were nothing special. The old man's eyes filled with disbelief, then something deeper, heavier. He nodded slowly, as if words might betray him, and sat by the window where sunlight touched his worn face. He ate slowly, carefully, like someone savoring not just food, but dignity. When he left, he paused at the door and looked back at Mara with an expression she couldn't name, then disappeared into the brightness of the afternoon. The rest of the day passed like any other. Spilled coffee, impatient customers, aching feet. Mara wondered briefly if she'd done the right thing, especially when she counted her tips and realized how thin the week would be. That night, she lay awake listening to traffic hum outside her window, replaying the man's face in her mind. She told herself it was just kindness, that it didn't need a reason or a reward. She didn't know she'd already stepped into a story much bigger than her own. The next morning, the cafe buzzed with its usual daytime rhythm. Sunlight poured through the windows, children laughed in the park outside, and the smell of fresh bread filled the air. Mara was wiping down tables when the door opened and the room seemed to shift. A tall man in a tailored charcoal suit stepped inside, polished shoes gleaming, posture calm and confident. Conversation softened, heads turned. He looked out of place and yet completely at home. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on Mara, and something familiar flickered there. Her heart skipped when she recognized him. The same eyes, the same presence. Only now, the thin coat and shaking hands were gone. The man approached the counter with an unhurried grace, setting a leather briefcase beside him. Mara froze, unsure whether to smile or question her own memory. The cafe owner emerged from the back, greeting the man with sudden respect, unaware of the storm quietly rising in Mara's chest. The truth unfolded not with drama, but with gravity. The man was Rowan Hale, the founder and sole owner of the cafe chain, a quiet billionaire who had stepped away from public life after a family tragedy. For months, he had wandered anonymously, testing the world, searching for proof that kindness still existed without cameras or applause. That morning, when he couldn't pay, it hadn't been an act of desperation but a final test of faith. And Mara had passed it without hesitation. Mara listened, barely breathing, as the weight of her small choice settled into something enormous. She expected praise, maybe even embarrassment, but what she felt instead was fear. Fear that she didn't belong in this moment, fear that her simple life was about to be exposed and judged. She thought of her unpaid bills, her brother's future, the way she sometimes skipped meals to save money. She felt small again, but Rowan saw none of that. He saw a young woman who had given without calculation. Over the next hour, the cafe watched in quiet astonishment as Rowan announced changes that would ripple far beyond those wooden walls. Wages would increase. Schedules would become humane. Scholarships would be offered to employees pursuing education. And one position, newly created, would be offered to Mara, not as a reward, but as trust. A role overseeing community outreach, ensuring that the cafe would become a place where no one was ever made to feel invisible again. Mara's life did not transform overnight into luxury or ease. She still lived in the same apartment, still rode the bus to work, still counted her money carefully. But something fundamental had shifted. She walked taller. She spoke with purpose. She became a bridge between struggling people and quiet hope. And every morning, as daylight filled the cafe, she remembered the feeling of sliding that money into the register, unaware of what it would become. Rowan continued to visit, sometimes in suits, sometimes dressed simply, always sitting by the window where sunlight touched the table. He never treated Mara like a symbol or a story. He treated her like a human being who had reminded him why his life's work mattered in the first place. The cafe grew into a sanctuary, not because of wealth, but because kindness had been written into its foundation. Years later, when Mara looked back on that day, she realized the miracle wasn't that a homeless man turned out to be rich. The miracle was that kindness had existed before the revelation, pure and unguarded. That was what changed everything. If this story stirred something inside you, if it reminded you of the quiet power of compassion, please take a moment now to like, comment, and share this video. Your engagement helps these stories reach hearts that need them most. Special request: comment below with a single word that describes how this story made you feel. Because sometimes, the smallest act in the brightest part of the day becomes the light that guides someone home.